And thank you for being here. I'm Kim. I'm your OLLI coordinator. Let me share my screen with you. Let's see. All right, so you should be seeing my slideshow here. I want to welcome you again to today's presentation and thank you for being here. I have shared my screen with you, and I wanted to thank you all and thank the Friends of OLLI for making these brown bag presentations possible. It's their generous donations that help us to continue to provide free presentations and scholarships for our members and so many other ways that they support us. We thank them for their support, and we want you to know that OLLI membership is open to anyone in the community. You don't have to be 50 to enjoy the benefits of being an OLLI member. Each year the OLLI membership begins on July 1st and runs through June 30th. And we are working right now to get our membership up to the required 1,000 members that we need each year. Right now, we are at 425 members. So if you have already joined, I want to say thank you. And if you haven't joined OLLI yet, we know what to do. Following the presentation today, we'll make the recording available on our website, and you can just navigate to the brown bag page on our website and follow the links to the archives. We're just about ready to get started. And so again, please mute yourself. And if you have questions, it's fine to put them in the chat or to raise your hand and we'll call on you. And Larry also said that he will allow some time for questions as he's going along his presentation. So thanks again for being part of OLLI today. And Jane, would you like to go ahead and introduce our presenter today?
I think I can do that. And I'm delighted to welcome all of you and also our speaker, Larry Oetker, who's the Executive Director of the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District. Taking his experience as a former land use planning, building, economic and redevelopment director for the city of Arcata, he has been working to expand aquaculture, broadband, wood products, and offshore wind opportunities around Humboldt Bay. Prior to working for the Humboldt Harbor District, where he was the community development director for the city of Arcata and managed the Hoopa Tribal Environmental Protection Agency. He's lived in Humboldt since 1989 and is a graduate of HSU. Larry, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And if I'm rambling on or if you have any questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand and interrupt me at any time. I just wanted to add what Jane had said is that I've lived in Humboldt County since 1989. And my wife is who's the smarter one in the family, is the executive director of the Eureka Zoo Foundation. And my daughter is up at Pacific University, which is in Forest Grove outside of Portland. And so we've been here since 1989, and we're proud to call Humboldt our home. And so as Jane had said, the overarching theme of my presentation is to re-establish Humboldt Bay as a port of regional and national significance. This is something that we've been talking about for a long time in Humboldt. I mean, as long as I've been here in 1989, the timber was still king. It was a lot of mills was going on. There was the two pulp mills were happening on the Samoa Peninsula, a lot of timber operations. And just since I've been here, since 1989, there's been a dramatic decrease in the amount of activity in and around Humboldt Bay. And so the board of the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District really set a path of how do we revitalize the port of Humboldt. And so just a quick little reminder is that Humboldt Bay is California's second largest bay. We're a little bit bigger than San Diego Bay, but not as big as San Francisco. And so we are a full-fledged, large port. We just don't act like it, and we haven't been developing Humboldt Bay, for the opportunities that are around it. And so, as the name implies, a lot of people say, oh, the Harbor District. But we are actually the Harbor Recreation and Conservation District is what our full title is. And so, when we look at this, is that we cover a number of recreational and conservation items that I'm not going to go over today, but there's a wide variety of conservation measures. We're getting ready to do invasive species eradication on the entire Indian Island. We do eelgrass mitigation. We do all kinds of different environmental review. Plus we work to do recreational opportunities throughout the region. And so, the Harbor District we're a countywide special district, and we follow the same boundaries as the Board of Supervisors. And so we have a 5-member board, and they represent the exact same districts or divisions as the Board of Supervisors. And so wherever you happen to live is that you have a person from Humboldt County that represents you on the Harbor District Board. We have full permit jurisdiction over everything below the high tide line in Humboldt Bay. And we also control Shelter Cove. And by controlling, I mean that we have state tideland trust responsibility. And essentially, we're the landowner of Humboldt Bay and Shelter Cove. And so, as you may know, is that when basically the federal government, passed on the rights and privileges to the states, or a number of people would say, well, the states passed on their rights to the federal government. Basically, the states retained jurisdiction over the water resources, and those were primarily for navigation purposes and fisheries. And so the state retained ownership of the tidal trust lands, and they've transferred those over to the Harbor District. You may also hear some people talk about like the regulatory authority and what like Arcata and Eureka and the county, they have what's called local coastal plans. And so ports are able to have a master plan, which is the equivalent to a local coastal plan. And per the Coastal Act, there's really only 5 ports in the entire state of California. And those are the Port of Humboldt, which is in essentially LA region, Long Beach, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Humboldt Bay. And those are the only ports in the entire state of California. There are a number of harbors, which are much smaller, and you might think of those as like fishing villages and fishing harbors, but there's only 5 full-fledged ports in California. And so within the Coastal Act, this is language that comes right out of the Coastal Act, and it says that Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District constitutes one of the state's primary economic and coastal resources, and that we're an essential element of the national maritime academy or industry. And then it goes on to say that the Humboldt Bay is encouraged to modernize and construct new facilities. And so this is really directions right from the Coastal Act that says that we're supposed to modernize and construct new facilities. And it's primarily because they don't want to have to create new ports because we have these 5 ports and they don't plan to expand or have any new ports. And so we have been working with these other agencies and kind of developed a strategy of how we would go about revitalizing and creating a regional economic hub with the County of Humboldt, Redwood Coast Energy Authority, the newly formed Samoa Peninsula Community Service District, Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District, City of Eureka, and the City of Arcata. We've all been meeting and getting together regularly and looking at strategies of how can we work together. This is the common theme, because we cannot do it alone. The Harbor District can't do it alone. The county can't do it alone. None of these jurisdictions can do this alone. We have to work together, and we have to coordinate and cooperate in order to make this happen. Because again, the Harbor District really only has control over what's below the high tide line, even though most of the economic activity is actually on land which is not within our permit jurisdiction. And so one of the themes that you might hear me talk about is really the blue economy. And the Harbor District is focusing on these really 5 industries: forest products, aquaculture, broadband, offshore wind, and other coastal related industries. But of course, I didn't mention this, but commercial fishing and recreational fishing are huge aspects of Humboldt Bay, and those are huge emphasis for the board and things that the Harbor District is working on. So if you think about the blue economy, right, and in general, the blue economy is anything that you essentially derive economic benefit from the ocean, is what that gets to. And if you kind of take a step back for a second to just say that you want to create a business that needs access to the water or needs to utilize the water for your business, and you're in San Diego or you're in LA or you're in San Francisco, and you need to lease land in order to start your business on the water, well, can you imagine how expensive that is in those jurisdictions? It's next to impossible to get started in those areas because the cost of real estate is just off the charts. And here in Humboldt Bay, we have lots of vacant and underutilized commercial and industrial properties around the bay that we need to be attracting some of these blue economy businesses that want to develop new products that are associated with the ocean. And so, as I mentioned before, if you look at the Samoa Peninsula, and I'm primarily going to focus in on the Samoa Peninsula, this is the Samoa Peninsula in the 90s where we had 2 former pulp mills in operation, lumber mills around the bay on the city of Eureka side and on the Samoa Peninsula side. And for all intensive purposes, around the middle of 2000, all of those went away. And for the last about 15 years, most of the Samoa Peninsula has sat underutilized and completely vacant. And so most people that I talk to on the economic development side, they say, what in the world has the County of Humboldt and the Harbor District been doing? Have they just been lazy? Are they stupid? What are they doing to revitalize all of this vacant land that we have? And if you take a look at this, and if you really think in terms of how big is the Samoa Peninsula, so pretty much everybody drives through the city of Eureka, and when you're going south on 5th Street, and you're just turning the corner going to Broadway, where I believe it's Christine's, the market, and Nielsen Feed is right there. And you go all the way through Eureka, basically to Kmart. And then you go from Highway 101 to the bay and the city of Eureka side. All of that property in that whole entire area where Costco, Pearson's, the shopping mall, all of that area is approximately the same size as the Samoa Peninsula. So really a huge, huge area that is almost completely underutilized. And so what have we been focusing on? And so we've really been focusing on these public infrastructures, repairs, and modernization. And so we need to build a new multi-purpose dock to attract the shipping industry, shoreline protection, and sea level rise, because we're definitely vulnerable to sea level rise and climate change and all of those factors. So we're looking at sea level rise and shoreline protection measures. An energy island design with DG Fairhaven has a biomass power plant, and energy resiliency is absolutely huge. A couple of years ago, there were blackouts and businesses were shut down because of fires, rolling blackouts. You cannot have a stable economic development if you have completely unreliable power. People need to go to work and they need to have reliable power. And if you're focused on the coast, you're in fisheries, aquaculture, anything that involves cold storage, you absolutely have to have power all the time in order to maintain any kind of cold storage or pumping or anything like that. So energy island and energy resiliency is absolutely crucial. We've also been working on a 12-month port strategy. In other words, in the wintertime, we get lots of big storms that come in, and sometimes historically we've had draft restrictions and other things in the winter months. And so we really need to keep the port open 12 months a year in order to have reliable commerce. One of the things that you might notice is that for the last year and a half, the Army Corps of Engineers has been doing a $22 million jetty reconstruction project on both the north and the south jetty. Currently, they're working on the south jetty, and so that's really is our front line of defense. And then also maintaining these navigation channels that we have to keep the shipping. Quickly, then we have the ocean outfall pipe, saltwater intake systems, wastewater treatment, water distribution, fire, industrial, domestic, and saltwater. Essentially, on the Samoa Peninsula, most of the infrastructure was put in the 1950s and 60s, and frankly, it's just falling apart. It just really is falling apart, and it needs to be appropriately sized and modernized in order to attract new development. So these are really the core things that we've been working on in order to attract the Samoa Peninsula and make it efficient for development. And so the County of Humboldt recently, they initiated the process. They adopted a resolution of the intent to form the Samoa Peninsula Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District. And what this is no new taxes. There's no new taxes at all. It's basically when you pay your $1 property tax, then generally here's how it gets distributed throughout the County of Humboldt. And so then the idea being that if the county could take a portion of the money that they currently collect or are anticipated to collect with new development, and if they reinvested it in the Samoa Peninsula to upgrade some of this infrastructure, then we would be able to update the infrastructure and have a way to pay for it through the increased property taxes that development would take place. And so, this is a big table and there's a lot of stuff. But anyway, with the projects that are currently either permitted or in the process on the Samoa Peninsula, it would result in approximately $2,100,000 a year of new taxes that would come in. And over a 20-year lifetime, that would be about $66 million that if the county reinvested that into infrastructure on the Samoa Peninsula, then we could have new and improved infrastructure in order to attract clean, green, and modern infrastructure for industries on the Samoa Peninsula for this blue economy. So these are all the things, and I'm not going to go over these, that are eligible under this proposed new financing district that the county would reinvest the revenues. Again, no new taxes. There's no new taxes at all. It purely is just taking the same 1% property tax that every property has, and then reinvesting a portion of those property taxes back into the Samoa Peninsula. And just to be clear, is that all the schools, the library, all of those will be fully funded. None of the taxes that would go to the school district or to the library would be impacted by any of this proposed project. And so then within the last year, there's been a brand new wastewater treatment plant constructed on the Samoa Peninsula. So here is the town of Samoa, and most people probably don't know this, but one of the core issues on the Samoa Peninsula with economic development is that there was no wastewater treatment plant, and that all of the wastewater had to go into leach fields. And because the groundwater is so shallow, the water board and the county's environmental health put a moratorium and said there's no new leach fields on the entire Samoa Peninsula. And so, as you can imagine, if you can't have a leach field, means you can't have any new bathrooms. If you can't have any new bathrooms, you can't have development. You cannot have jobs if you cannot go to the bathroom. That's really is just a common sense thing, and most people don't think about these things, but there's a brand new wastewater treatment plant that's constructed in this green area, and it currently discharges out the ocean outfall that the Harbor District owns that was part of the former Louisiana Pacific pulp mill. And so phase one has all been approved and is in place right now. And then this area that is in red, which would go all the way up to the Samoa boat ramp, basically the campground, will be included as part of the new wastewater distribution system for the Samoa Peninsula. And the environmental impact report has all been approved by the county. It's been submitted to the Coastal Commission. And so it's anticipated that this will be approved within the next 6 months. And again, the wastewater treatment plant is already installed. It's already constructed and is already discharging out the Harbor District's ocean outfall pipe. And so water supply, the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District has their industrial water lines. And there's an industrial water line. And when you think about the water, and I'm not an expert, again, this is our partner, the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District. They have two completely different systems. One is the domestic water, which is fully treated and filtered water that comes from the Mad River. And that's what you open up your tap. And that's what comes out of your tap water at your house. And then they also have an industrial water system. And there were 70 million gallons a day capacity that went and fed the two pulp mills, and 40 million gallons a day went to the Harbor District's property, the former Louisiana Pacific pulp mill. And so by comparison, the entire city of Eureka uses 8 million gallons a day of domestic water, and Arcata uses 3 million gallons a day, and Kinleyville uses 3 million gallons a day. And there's 40 million gallons a day of surplus industrial water that other jurisdictions are poised to steal from the county of Humboldt if there are not uses for that water. It's been well documented, and especially with drought conditions, people are poised to steal that water. And at some point, if we do not use that, then you can guarantee that there will be proposals to steal the water out of Humboldt Bay. And so the Harbor District is also working on developing a saltwater well at the former pulp mill, which would be 12 million gallons a day. And this is really, really critical for a variety of different industries that we've been working to attract. The upland aquaculture industries. We also, at the pulp mill, one of our tenants, they actually pump water from Humboldt Bay and they make sea salt. And those are sold in gourmet restaurants all over San Francisco. And so there's a whole variety of aquaculture and other coastal related and other businesses that need salt water in order to make those work. And while I'm here, you can see on the top of the building of the former pulp mill this is 730,000 kilowatts of solar systems that the Harbor District has on the roof of the former pulp mill. And that supplies all of the power for all of the Harbor District's properties on the Samoa Peninsula, including Woodley Island Marina and Hills Landing Boat Yard. So all of the Harbor District's power are being provided by the solar power that's generated on the roof of the former pulp mill property.
Larry, I'm
yes.
sorry, this is Kim. Before you go on, there are a couple of questions, so I wanted to see if you wanted to speak to those before we get too far ahead.
Okay, so can I do 2 slides more and then I'll pause?
Perfect.
For questions. I just want to kind of finish with the former pulp mill property. And so we call the former Louisiana pulp mill the Redwood Marine Terminal 2. And so on the Redwood Marine Terminal 2, there's a variety of different assets that are there. And between the USAPA and the Harbor District, we spent over $20 million to clean up that property, $20 million. And then we've revitalized it, and we currently have 18 tenants with over 100 jobs that are located on the former pulp mill property. When we acquired the property in 2014, it was dilapidated, falling apart, full of contamination. And now I'm happy to say is that the vast majority of the property has been cleaned up, but with our partners, the EPA, the Water Board, and the Harbor District. We have 18 tenants, including a vibrant Taylor Seafood, Coast Seafood, and our new tenant, Nordic Aqua Farms. And we've really been focused on this. Just two quick slides, or a couple slides here. With the ocean outfall pipe that was part of this is it's projected to be as 30 million gallons a day capacity. And when Nordic Aqua Farms comes online, we will be discharging approximately 15.5 million gallons a day out the ocean outfall pipe that goes 1.5 miles out. We've really worked hard to maintain that. The Nordic Aqua Farms is proposing to tear down all the main buildings. When you look at the former pulp mill, you'll see the big tall building, the smokestack. Really, all of the buildings will be torn down with the exception of the 200,000 square foot warehouse that's in the front. And the environmental impact report will be public within the next 2 weeks. And then we're anticipating that the hearings will be before the Board of Supervisors in February of 2022. And again, they're proposing to do a $500 million investment and to build 600,000 square feet of new indoor recirculating and take down the big tall building, the smokestack, and all of the former remnants of the property, and to do any last cleanup of any contamination issues. My last one on the pulp mill is that this is an aquaculture operation that Taylor Seafood has. We did a pre-permitting project where we pre-permitted 21 acres in the water so that aquaculture industry could go and start their business. If you can imagine that you're a small business and you want to start up an aquaculture business, do you know what it would take to get the permits? It would take at least $100,000 for every business that wanted to do an aquaculture operation, and generally takes about 2 years worth of time. And so the Harbor District went out and we did a pre-permitting. In other words, we got all the permits, we did all of the operations, and we pre-permitted these. We currently have 4 leases for businesses that are doing aquaculture, and we have 3 more pending in these 21 acres that we have here. And again, we did all of the groundwork, we pre-permitted it, and now all we have to do is lease it to the property owners. So I'm going to go ahead and take a pause there and take a couple of questions.
Thank you. The first question was back in the very early part of your presentation when you were talking about the different ports, and the question was, doesn't the San Francisco Bay Area also have a port? So I'm guessing the answer is yes to that. And I'm sorry I missed that question right away. And then the other part of that question, is there a way to take the load off the ports that are backed up in Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Oakland? I don't know if there's anything we can do.
You are correct that San Francisco is a port, and I apologize for that. I was referring to the Coastal Act, but anyway, San Francisco is not subject to the Coastal Commission. They have their own regulations. And so then the second question is that I was on a panel last week in San Diego with the ports of Long Beach and Port Hueneme and LA. And LA and Long Beach combined do 40% of all the container traffic in the entire United States. And so really, Humboldt Bay is not set up to be a container port, and there's really nothing that Humboldt Bay can do to help with that congestion. That's really not the kind of port that we are doing. Really, the actions that President Biden and the ports have taken is to really turn them into 24 hours operation instead of just 5 day a week, 8 to 5 kind of ports, 24 hours a day operation. And then the second thing was really there's so much congestion in the ports. They need to have inland about 20 or 30 miles, basically a hub where they take all the containers 20, 25 miles out. And then that allows them to take containers, and then somebody moves them out of the way right away, immediately, and that allows them to operate. And so if they could implement those couple of changes, but they really have to work with labor unions and truckers and other people in order to implement that.
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you. Another question asks, and it goes back to when you were sharing some of the budget information. Does your tax funding come out of the redevelopment or the special districts allocations?
Currently, there is no redevelopment. California outlawed redevelopment. I think it was like 2015 or something like that. And there is no redevelopment anymore. And so those would come out of the county of Humboldt share. And all of the special districts and everybody would still get their portion of the tax revenues.
Thanks again. So there's one more question, and you may be coming to this a little bit later in your presentation. It's asking, how will projected sea level rise impact the development of the North Spit? And that's the last question that I have right now.
Okay. Yeah, I'll address that in a couple minutes here on the sea level rise. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kind of get started onto kind of the second topic. You know, as the first part, I was kind of talking about the basic infrastructure and then the aquaculture industries that we're working on. Now I'm going to jump into broadband. And so with the broadband is there's a number of broadband or fiber optic, you hear different terminology that's used for this. Basically, it's your internet, is for all intents and purposes, internet or digital phone. And so in 2017, Assembly Member Woods announced that California had allocated $47 million to really do broadband on Highway 299, what they call the Digital 299. And so with that, what that basically means is that pretty much from Cottonwood, Redding, all the way to Eureka, with some spurs that would go up to Hoopa and up to Trinidad and to a couple of other smaller communities, there's brand spanking new fiber optic that will be installed in the next year all the way down Highway 299 corridor over to Redding, and then that's where the main transmission line is. And then from this Highway 299 corridor, that connects into 4 trans-Pacific fiber optic lines at the Harbor District's pulp mill property. So again, this is the pulp mill's property here. The big smokestack that you see from the Eureka side is located where my cursor is, right there. The big tall building is there. And so the cable landings are landing right here on the Harbor District's property at the former Louisiana Pacific. And so there are 4 trans-Pacific broadband fiber optic lines that are connecting at the property. And from our property, these trans-Pacific lines, they connect into the main line that goes to the city of Arcata. And in the city of Arcata, where some of you recall where Best Lumber or Coleman Lumber or Nielsen Feed was located on 11th Street in Arcata, there's a brand new data hub that's being constructed right now. That's under construction right now. And so if you drive by there, and that data hub is really critically important because these main transmission lines, if you think about them, they're kind of like overhead power lines. And so these are like the main power lines that come out of the PG&E power plant, the main overhead power lines. You cannot plug your appliances into those. They have to go to a substation and then download it into transformers to get into usable form. This is the same thing with these main transmission lines. You cannot just tap into those unless they go through substations. And the substation is really the data hub that's being constructed in Arcata right now. And so from that data hub, that allows our area to tap directly into this new main infrastructure. And one of the very first connections that's going to be made to this data hub is going to go directly to Humboldt State University. And really this connectivity will give us direct connection to all the way to the national internet lines through these new high-speed cables. And then the broadband cables will go from the former Louisiana Pacific pulp mill property And the first two cables will go to Taiwan, and then what is the world's longest cable goes to Singapore. And so literally this month, they installed these first two cables are being installed right now as we speak. The cable ship is in port right now. And so what they did was they basically went and from our property, they did a directional bore where they went from land and then went out into the Pacific Ocean, 1.2 miles, about 50 feet under the floor of the ocean. And they put 4 10-inch conduits that go from land 1.2 miles out into the ocean. And then from 1.2 miles out in the ocean, then the ship comes and it has a big plow at the bottom of it. And it plows the sandy bottom of the ocean floor for the net for out to 30 miles. And it plows the cable about 5 feet under the ocean floor. And the reason why this is important was to not have impacts on the commercial fishing industry. And so for the first 30 miles from shore until you get to the continental shelf, the cable is between 5 feet and 50 feet under the floor of the ocean. And so that way it won't get hung up on any crab pots, any fishing trawl lines, or anything. This was really an important factor in getting all the approvals for this. And there's an agreement with the local fishermen so that if there are any impacts associated with the project, then they could tap into a fund in order to get reimbursed for their impacts. And so this broadband connectivity is really huge for our area. You may not notice it for your individual household, but there's definitely reliability and redundancy. And so the impacts for this are going to be broad in our community. What this enables people to do is that if one of your kids or you yourself are into gaming or making games or any video production, really anything that takes high broadband capabilities, this will allow us to really attract new businesses and also to have people that literally work in Eureka, Arcata, or other places around our area. And they literally could be working in Hollywood, or they could be working in Silicon Valley, or for another university or a major company. And really to be able to do this work at home and work in these really high skilled, high technical environments. This is a huge deal for our region, and it's something that the Harbor District, the university, and a whole variety of people have been working on for some time.
Real quick before you go on, Larry, who owns the data hub?
The data hub, it's a private company that owns that, and I can't tell you exactly who that company is. I don't know. It's some mysterious company, I guess you'd say. My understanding is that 2 of these cables, one is owned by or is leased by Facebook, and one is leased by Google of the 2 cables. But there's other international companies. The undersea cables are owned by a company called RTI Infrastructure, and the cables that are being installed between the pulp mill and Arcata are owned by Vero. And then there's a third company, which the city of Arcata has building permits in their name. And I just don't recall who that company is off the top of my head.
Thank you.
And so with the wood chip industry, and now I'm sort of shifting over to the wood chip industry and just going to briefly kind of go into this, is, as you know, there's a DG Fairhaven, which is a biomass power plant that's on the Sonora Peninsula, and Green Diamond has a chip export facility, basically a wood chip export facility. So if you're at the Wharfinger building and you look across and you see the big pile of wood chips, that's Green Diamond, and they traditionally export to China, mainly to Japan and Korea, is who their primary tenants are. but they also do some export to China. They also do export up to Vancouver and Grays Harbor in Washington. And so one of the things that we've been discussing for some time is that we're perfectly situated to do what's called a wood pellet manufacturing. And that's like if you have a wood stove. And a lot of that is due to really is that you'll hear for climate change that Japan and a lot of the countries in the Far East, they use coal or really poor quality, highly polluting sources for home heating. And so it's really thought that some of these wood pellets are a really good short-term transition product. And that at the same time as when we do forest clearing, we need to do a lot of forest clearing so that it doesn't create forest fires to do really the thinning projects. And those thinning, which are really low quality wood, those can be converted into these wood pellets and that we could export those. So again, with the DG Fairhaven and the Harbor District's solar system that we have on the roof of the former pulp mill, we're working with Redwood Community Coast Energy Authority to do a renewable energy microgrid to get clean, reliable power on the Samoa Peninsula. And so the Forest Service in Humboldt County recently received a grant. And so if you look, and here's DG Fairhaven, the pulp mill is right here, and DG Fairhaven, the power plant is right next to it. And then the Green Diamond chip export facility is literally right behind the Green Diamond. And then this wood pile over here, this is Fox Farm, are over here. What's really been identified is this area, which is the former Simpson pulp mill, is really a good location for Forest Products Innovation Zone. And so the county, the Forest Service, the property owner, and a variety of people are really looking to attract wood products industries. And there's a lot of really innovative new products that can be made with some of this cleared wood and other miscellaneous debris from the forest. And so with COVID, really, the cruise ship industry completely went to a halt. It was really the first industry that was hard hit. In August, this vessel here, which is a brand new ship, is going to be arriving in Humboldt Bay. And we have 4 other cruise ships that we currently have scheduled to arrive in Eureka in 2022. It's part of our goal of diversifying and getting additional tourism and vessels into the port of Humboldt Bay. And again, there's a group that's we're involved in with the city of Eureka and the county of Humboldt to really attract cruise ships. And I was in San Diego last week, and believe it or not, there was 3 cruise ships that were going in and out of San Diego Bay, and people were happy, smiling, and going on and off of those cruise ships. And so it's good to see some reality coming back. And the cruise ship industry was one of the hardest hits from COVID. So I had mentioned the Army Corps of Engineers $22 million jetty reconstruction project. What had happened was, this is a picture of the jetty. There were these breaches that had occurred on the jetty, basically holes that had developed in the jetty. And when you think of sea level rise and shipping and other things, and really for our commercial fishing fleet and recreational, the jetty is really the front line of defense for our area. If that jetty was not there, we would not be protected from sea level rise, climate change, and we also would not be able to have the same kind of commercial fishing, recreational, and shipping that we currently have. So we worked with the Army Corps of Engineers, and they are currently investing $22 million in a reconstruction of both the north and the south jetty. At the end of the project, what you will see is a new concrete cap that will be on top. For those of you that have walked on the jetty, you know this, that there were big holes in the middle of it. It was kind of a safety hazard. Well, at the end of the day, there should be a new concrete cap. Legally, technically, you're not supposed to walk on the jetty. It's off limits, but there's no enforcement of that, and it really is unrealistic. There's a number of people that use the jetty for fishing. The surfers regularly use the jetty to get on and off, and a number of people use it for just recreational activities as well. But it is a very, very dangerous area, and there have been a number of people that have been killed or seriously injured on the jetty because we do experience large winter swells that can reach 30 feet or more in the entrance channel. So when you look at the entrance to Humboldt Bay, is we really have these jetties which protrude out from the north and the south jetties. And part of the reason why I wanted to show you this picture was you often hear about dredging, right? And when we talk about dredging, you're really either talking about dredging the entrance or the main federal navigation channels. And those are all done by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Those are paid for in full and contracted, or they use their own vessels with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. For the Harbor District, we dredge Woodley Island Marina and some of the other docks that we maintain, and the city of Eureka dredges the Eureka Small Boat Basin, and that we are responsible for those. When you hear most of the complaints, they're actually because of the city of Eureka or the Harbor District. And both the Harbor District and the city of Eureka both have gotten dredging permits, and we have been actively dredging the marinas. On Woodley Island, there's still lots of problems that we have to deal with dredging, but we do have the dredging to permit. So when you look at the entrance, what is this dredging and what happens? Well, the currents are traditionally from the south. Every once in a while, the currents will shift and they will come from the north, but for the majority of the time, they come from the south. And what you can see here is this color differential right here. It clearly shows that the Eel River is a sediment machine. When the winter storms come in, it drops, they say, as much sediment as the Mississippi River comes out of the Eel River in the wintertime. And that's because we're a highly erosive environment, and because of the earthquake and the uplifts, it causes a lot of landslides on the Eel River, and those landslides result in a large amount of sediment that comes into the bay. And so if you look at this, these jetties, basically, normally if these weren't here, these jetties would stop the sand, and the sand would proceed up along to the north jetty. But what happens is the sand, if we focus on the south jetty, the sand comes up along the beach and it goes right around the south jetty, and then it drops off right here in the entrance, right at the entrance. That's where the problem occurs. And so when you hear dredging problems, that's what it is the sand is going north from the Eel River along the dunes, goes around the south jetty, and then drops the sediment as it enters Humboldt Bay, and it creates shoaling or shallowing at the entrance of Humboldt Bay. And so we've been really working with the Army Corps of Engineers to develop strategies, and one of the most realistic strategies to reduce the shoaling in Humboldt Bay is to do what's called an overdraft or over dredging. In other words, if they dug a big hole right here on the outside of the jetty, then the sand would come up the Eel River and would get deposited not in the channel, but it would get deposited in the big hole if they would dig it right outside of the jetty. So that's something that we're working with the Army Corps of Engineers to do. Instead of having the sand come up every year, year after year after year, and get deposited right over here, what we'd like them to do is do an overdraft right here and allow the sediment to drop off before it gets deposited into the main channel, and then come back and re-dredge that area right there. And so I'm going to kind of stop with the dredging for a second and go to the climate change question. And so with climate change and sea level rise, our first line of defense are the dunes. So the dune replenishment, it comes from the sand. And so if you look at the Wildlife Refuge, the Friends of the Dunes, they've done a number of different studies of the North and South dunes. And so the South jetty are actually getting larger because of all the sand that comes up from the Eel River. The North jetty is actually being, basically it's what's they consider to be balanced at this point. It's not growing, but it really is not receding. And the concern is that all of the sand that comes from the Eel River on the South jetty, then the Army Corps of Engineers digs about 1 million cubic yards of sand, and they take that 1 million cubic yards and they deposit that 3 miles offshore. And so instead of taking that material and having it go to the North jetty where it could work with beach replenishment. And so there's a number of different activities that people are looking at to get the Army Corps of Engineers to deposit, instead of taking that sand 3 miles offshore, of taking it and having it part of a beach replenishment project on the North jetty area, or the North dunes, beaches. And so with sea level rise and just a couple of things that the Harbor District is doing and that we're working on with sea level rise. From my perspective, is sea level rise and climate change are real. We see it every day on the dunes. You can just tell, and you can see the erosion that's happening all over the place. Around Woodley Island Marina, really every place around the bay, there's a number of different erosion that's happening. And you can clearly see the flooding that is inundating these low-lying areas. And so when you look at sea level rise, really there's, you can retreat or you can adapt, and there's a few other different strategies that you have. But the reality is for marinas, boat ramps, shipping terminals, these kinds of coastal dependent things, there is no retreat. Retreat is not an option. It is not an option. Is that, where are you going to retreat to? Where are you going to retreat a new marina? Where are you going to retreat a new shipping terminal? Where are you going to retreat a new boat ramp? We need to raise some of these areas up. And so, as an example, I had mentioned that 1 million cubic yards of material of sand they take out of this area. So 1 million cubic yards, if you put this into context, and you said you have 1 million cubic yards and you have a football field, so you have an entire football field and it's 6 feet tall, which is what sea level rise is projected to grow at its maximum in 2100. That 1 million cubic yards equates to 90 football fields, 6 feet tall. So in other words, the area from the Adorney Center in Eureka to the Samoa Bridge, if you raised that entire area 6 feet tall, it wouldn't even be 1 year's worth of sand that is every year that they take 3 miles offshore. And just 2 weeks ago, the Harbor District received approval from dredge material that we dredged from Woodley Island Marina. We took the dredge material from Woodley Island Marina. We took it over to the former pulp mill property. We offloaded it, took the water out, dried it, and now we have the approval from all of the regulatory agencies to take it to the town of Samoa and use that for sea level rise, tsunami fill. So in other words, to raise up some of these low-lying areas, we have all the approval. And we did these studies that said if you mixed it with the beach sand that's already underlying the Samoa Peninsula, if you take 30% of sand and the 70% silty material, then you can use it for construction fill. so that you can actually use this dredge material for construction fill on the Samoa Peninsula. And we recently, within the last 2 weeks, received approval from all of the regulatory agencies to do that. So I've been talking for a long time, and so then I'm going to shift over to the offshore wind. So is there any other questions before I jump over to that?
There are a couple, I think you answered some. One question goes back a little ways, and it asked, do we have a business that is planning to construct the wood pellet facility that you spoke about?
We talked to several different companies that are interested in talking about it. And here's the reality is that if the federal government and the state government had a comprehensive thinning plan, then companies are ready to invest in order to do that. The reality is the federal government and the state government do not have a comprehensive forest thinning or clearing plan. And by default, the plan is let it burn. And that has been the plan for a number of years. It's indisputable. That is what is happening. And not having a plan results in having a plan, which is let it burn. And until we get a thinning project that is developed by the federal and state governments, then the private sector is ready to invest in a pellet manufacturing, and a number of different companies have looked at our property.
Nice. Okay, thank you. And then what dock will the cruise ships use?
The cruise ships historically have used the Snyder dock, and that's where Costco is in Eureka, and then behind Costco is Skybauer Lumber, and so the Snyder dock is right behind the big lumber mill that is right there, and so it really with the waterfront trail that Eureka constructed, and the idea has been is they use that Snyder dock, and that gets them on the Eureka side, and then with that waterfront trail and with taxis and other things, they can get right into Old Town and go to some of the tourist ventures that we have around the area.
Got it. Thank you. And then quickly, will the height of the jetties be increased?
No, the height of the jetties are not going to be increased at this point, but at some point in the future, they most likely will need to be.
And there were a couple questions about the dredging material, but I think you as you continue your presentation, you did answer those questions. So I think we're good to go on.
Okay, I'll be right back. 1 second. So this friend of mine, as I have this picture right in front of you right now, this friend of mine came up and he made this little model of these dolos. And so this is what is at the end of the jetty right here. And he made me 2 of these little guys. And so anyway, it was Dan Tagney. He was on the Arcata Planning Commission. And so I just want to thank Dan for making these for me. And so one of the main things that we're working on is we're preparing Humboldt Bay to be California's offshore wind. And you probably heard of this, but I'll give you kind of an overview from the port's perspective. And so, when you think about offshore wind, these are going to be floating because it's really deep. And so they have these cables and anchors that go down, and then there are cables that connect each one of those together. And then there'll be an offshore substation that will occur. And then very similar to the broadband cable, they'll actually do the directional boring and exactly the way that I described the broadband cables, the same process will happen to go ashore. And so when you think about where will it come ashore, it will come ashore most likely at the PG&E power plant in Fields Landing, King Salmon, is where it will very likely come ashore. The Department of Defense is currently funding a study to look at doing an undersea cable, power cable, that would go from Humboldt all the way to the Bay Area. And that would basically reduce the fire impact and other issues with upgrading the transmission line out of our region. So when you look at these, this just goes to show wind turbines over the years and the height of them. And so in 2021, this is a 12 megawatt system, and this is what's mainly going in Europe and on the East Coast is these 12 megawatts. And there's a new 15 megawatt that's going in. And so just to give you an example, to the tip of the blade here is about 853 feet tall. And so this is the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. This is the Eiffel Tower here. And the Statue of Liberty is over here. So when you look at these, when they build these offshore wind, they build them fully upright in port, and then they tow them out the bay. So this is one of the main things that's really important about why Humboldt and why is everybody focused on Humboldt. Is if you think about it, San Diego has Coronado Island. LA is so congested with containers, they don't have any room at all, none, for any offshore wind stuff. San Francisco has the Golden Gate Bridge, and so all of the port facilities behind there, they cannot do that. So then in California, that leaves Humboldt as the only place you can do that. So when you look at the offshore wind, there are a number of different studies have happened and said that in California, there's the potential for 14,000 direct and operational jobs in offshore wind in a $20 to $50 billion state gross domestic product from offshore wind, but they need to have shipyard investment. There are currently no ports on the whole West Coast, none on the West Coast that are large enough to handle the offshore wind. They have to construct new from scratch. And so that makes it perfectly situated for Humboldt, which is that if you look at Humboldt Bay, it's only the call area or the lease area is only 21 miles directly off of Humboldt Bay. 21 miles is where the proposed leasing area is. And the Secretary of Interior came to Humboldt in August, and we toured the facilities, and they've announced that in the fall of 2022, next year, is when they are going to lease these areas. The environmental review process is happening right now for these leasing. This week, the state is having informational meetings with the local fishermen from Crescent City, Humboldt Bay, Norio Harbor. They've had initial outreach meetings to the tribes. This process is underway right now. And so when you look at this, the very first phase one is going to happen in the fall of 2021. And the first one is going to be Humboldt at 1.6 gigawatts of power and Morro Bay at 3 gigawatts of power. So Eureka's here, San Luis Obispo is in this area. So here's Morro Bay right here in this area. And Humboldt is up here. So future phases that have been identified are the Diablo Canyon, 4.3 gigawatts, which is again right down here by San Luis Obispo, and then Cape Mendocino, 6.2 gigawatts, and Del Norte of 6.6 gigawatts. So we have the highest wind resources right up here within 100 miles of Humboldt Bay. This is why all eyes are on Humboldt Bay, and that we're going to see these happening in the near term. And so with Humboldt Bay, we're an existing fully fledged port, 48 feet at the entrance. This is the entrance, and then 38 feet all the way up the Sonora Channel. All of the industry experts say this is deep enough for the needs, so no additional depth would be required to go in and out of the channel. So we've really been looking at how do you grow a wind energy cluster? How do you grow this business? And where's everything going to come from? The manufacturing, the blades, the towers, the foundations, the cable arrays, the anchors, all of these different pieces. Where are these going to come from? On the entire West Coast, there are no wind energy fabrication facilities, none, up and down the West Coast. So they're looking at developing new industries. to support this offshore wind, again, a $20 to $50 billion industry. So we've been looking at this, and we looked at the port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And again, this is a tower manufacturing facility. This is where they make the towers for Europe. And this is the exact sizes and shapes, and look at those. This is April of 2021, so just a couple of months ago. Construction starts on America's largest offshore wind hub in New Jersey, where they're looking to build a brand new tower manufacturing facilities to support the East Coast offshore wind. And so we looked at these in New Jersey, looked at what does the industry need and what are the sizes, shapes, what do they need to support this offshore wind industry. And then we go back to the Samoa Peninsula and we say we have all of this vacant and underutilized industrial land that was formerly used for manufacturing and facilities. And you look at, this is a floating platform, right? This is a floating platform. It's huge, giant. This is 300 feet wide. That's as long as a football field wide. This is what you would mount the tower on top of, and this is what floats. So this is what one of those looks like. And then what happens is basically they construct those on the port, and then they nudge it over onto a barge, and then this barge sinks. It's what they call a semi-submersible barge. They get it on the barge, and then the barge sinks. And then this platform floats, and then they tow it away, and then they refloat the barge, move it away. And then they tow it back to port. And again, they assemble these fully upright along the port. And so we really looked at this, we talked to the industry, and the industry, this is a rendering that the industry did, this Baker Offshore Wind did this, and this is literally the Samoa Peninsula. Samoa Cookhouse is right here in this exact location, and this is an example of what they would do, where the ships would come in, they could offload the products, and then we could assemble them here, and then they would basically tow them out the existing channel to 21 miles offshore. And these would be steel welding, manufacturing, painting, whole variety of different jobs would occur with that industry. So this is basically if they manufacture it somewhere else, and then if they manufacture the blades, the towers, the turbines somewhere else, and all they do is they just bring it to Humboldt, and then we just assemble them. That's what this option is. But we got together and said, well, what if, in addition to bringing them in from someplace else, and that's assembling them in this location, what if we actually were to take and build a tower manufacturing facility? And again, these are the exact same dimensions from the tower manufacturing facility that was in Rotterdam, Europe, and New Jersey. And this shows a blade manufacturing facility so that we could actually do a tower and a blade manufacturing facility and truly become the West Coast hub for offshore wind by creating manufacturing facilities that manufacture these products and then do full what's called vertical integration and then tow those out to port. And so I wanted to just stop here for just a second and then to just sort of show you within this master plan, this is the town of Samoa that is over here. The Samoa Cookhouse is right in this location. Right here is where the Samoa Cookhouse is. When you go over the bridge, it's the very first dock that you see. We would tear out that existing dock that you see, and we would build a brand new heavy lift dock that would be in this location. Here's where the Nordic Aqua Farms, this is the pulp mill facility that you see. The new Nordic Aqua Farms would be 600,000 square foot, and this is the Nordic Aqua Farms. Here is the cable landing project that's under construction right now. And here is the Harbor District's ocean outfall pipe and the Baywater Sea intake system. So we developed a comprehensive overall master plan for this area, where with the town of Samoa, the brand new wastewater treatment plant that they have, there's a brand new business park that's been all approved by the Coastal Commission and all the entities, and where we could revitalize the Port of Humboldt. And again, using these main areas to support the offshore wind industry, but also have other additional buildings where we could support broadband, aquaculture, forest products, and other industries. And so we did a phased master plan to show that it wouldn't have to be funded all at one time. And then we looked and said, you could either do this all as a gold rush, in other words, where the industry comes in, they build it all at one time and they get it out, or you could do a slow and a steady manufacturing project so that we could have sustained growth and really sustain these manufacturing jobs. What this is this is the Humboldt call area, the Morro Bay call area, and then after these call areas are developed, then you jump over and we do the Mendocino and the Del Norte, and we start to slowly manufacture all of those facilities that get us all the way to 2039 of supporting these manufacturing jobs. And then after that, then there may be additional call areas off the West Coast as we start to get off the offshore wind industry. And so again, the plan is off of Humboldt is that it's only 21 miles offshore. Why Humboldt Bay? We have existing deep, federally maintained navigation channels. We have no bridges or overhead obstructions, hundreds of acres of vacant industrial land, opportunities for manufacturing, fabrication, really the full shop. We're centrally located on the West Coast, so not only can you do the Humboldt call areas, but you can also supply to Morro Bay and up to Coos Bay and other areas off of Oregon as those areas developed. And we're working on getting broad community support. So as I start to wrap this up, in July of 2021, just a couple months ago, the state of California appropriated $20 million for offshore wind. Over half of that, or $11 million, went to the Port of Humboldt Bay to kickstart the environmental review, the engineering, so we can really get this thing permitted. Another $6.5 million was allocated for interagency permit streamlining. In other words, for the Coastal Commission, Fish and Wildlife, and the other state regulatory agencies to really work with the Harbor District and the other agencies to streamline the permitting in order to get offshore wind energy permitted and developed. And then another $2.2 million for community outreach, engagement, and technical reports. So the Harbor District, with this $11 million commitment from the state of California, in July, we applied for a $56 million port infrastructure development grant. And so we should find out in December whether or not we are awarded those funds. But it doesn't matter because the Harbor District is already starting to do we're about ready to release contracts to start the environmental review and the engineering for the full 168-acre purpose-built offshore wind terminal that I showed you. So we're just getting ready to start hiring the consultants with this $11 million that was appropriated to jumpstart the environmental review and the permitting for this new offshore wind terminal. And in June of 2022, there's supposed to be a report to the legislature on port readiness, the workforce development needs, and the transmission upgrade needs to really get offshore wind happening in the state of California. And in the fall of 2022 is when the Bureau of Offshore Energy Management is supposed to award the leases for both the Humboldt and the Morro Bay. And when they announce the award of those are the people that are going to be investing in the manufacturing, and all of that investment is going to start coming in when we know who has been awarded that. And so our plan is basically to get all of the permits to begin construction in 2025 so that we can be prepared for the offshore wind energy. And so I'm kind of wrapping up here. And one of the core things with the offshore wind industry that we're focused on is how do we maximize the amount of community benefit so that when the offshore wind industry comes here, that the jobs aren't somewhere else and we get the potential impacts, but we don't see the benefits. And so we're working with our partners to really look at developing a strong community benefit package. And the Secretary of the Interior, Congressman Huffman, and our state legislatures are really committed to seeing strong community benefits packages developed for here. And that would mean significant investment in the port infrastructure for Humboldt Bay, trying to develop as much of the supply chain locally in Arcata, Eureka, the Small Peninsula as we can for manufacturing, so for the retail and the distribution system so that they're buying local. This is really critical, buy local. We need to have workforce training, apprenticeship program, educational support programs. So we're working with Humboldt State University and the new Polytechnical and College of the Redwoods to get certification programs so that we can really have high-skilled, high-paying jobs for our kids in our local community so that they can get the jobs so we're not importing those. And we really need to have these strong workforce training and higher local workforce programs. This is critical for our region. And so then for the people that are truly impacted by the offshore wind, the Native American tribes, the fishermen, other groups that might be specifically impacted, that the offshore wind industry might participate in community investment funds that could be used to benefit those parties that might be the most impacted with those. And then also, our region should benefit from the energy resilient and electricity discounts that might come from the substantial offshore wind industry. So we really think as a region, we need to be focused on how do we maximize community benefits for our area so that we see widespread sustained investment in our community instead of seeing those resources go out to other areas. And as an example for that, with the fishing industry, we'd like to see additional fishermen storage area, like cold storage. There was a fishing community sustainability plan that the fishermen helped put together that identified specific items that the fishing industry feels like they need in order to really help them to absorb some of the impacts from the offshore wind and some of the other areas. And so lastly, these are areas where we might be able to get community benefits literally built into the process through the bond leasing process, through the state public utility commission when they buy power through the buyback power, through the state coastal commission when they issue the permits. Where do we make sure that we get community benefits built right into the requirements for authorizing offshore wind so that we see the benefits? And so just in conclusion, I rambled on a lot and hopefully I didn't bore you. But again, we're focused on the blue economy industries and forest products, aquaculture, broadband, offshore wind, and other coastal related industries are what we are focused on. We cannot do it alone. And so we're working with our partners and all of us working in unison together. We don't always agree. We often are working at odds, but we continue to try to work together as a region to try to develop clean, green, modern industries that are a good fit for our community. And so I thank you for the opportunity to come before you today. And it was great to see Larry Oetker there. I haven't seen him forever, and several other people. And so thank you very, very much. But know that the Harbor District is working hard to revitalize our community and find industries that are a good fit for our region and not trying to extract and take away from the values that we have as a region.
Well, Larry, thank you so much for all of this great information. There are a couple of questions, and I wonder if you have a few minutes just to stick around to answer these questions for us.
Oh, absolutely. I'm here for you.
So one of them goes back to the dredging of the jetty, and it asks, can the sand be sold to Southern California to replenish their beaches as a possible source of revenue?
No, and our position is that it should be used here locally. But in theory, it could. So
potentially in the future, perhaps.
Yes.
And then there's just another statement basically saying that I know you have said you are not factoring in the effect of housing on your workload. But however, if and when all this happens, along with the changes at HSU, et cetera, port development will have a huge effect on housing in Humboldt County, which is already at crisis stage. I urge you to include it in your budget, a position to increase collaboration on the housing problems. I know you have considerable knowledge of the issue from your great work at Arcata City, so thank you. And then another question, are you working with HSU and College of the Redwoods to offer classes and certificates to train people to work in these industries?
Yeah, right now, as a matter of fact, is that the College of the Redwoods is working on an aquaculture certification program, and that we're working with them to develop a new aquaculture lab that would be located right at the former pulp mill, directly adjacent to the Nordic Aqua Farms and some of our other aquaculture industry right there, so that the students would be able to see firsthand, aquaculture, and then hopefully those industries would hire people that would get trained and certified. And also, Humboldt is working on offshore wind, training engineers and other things, other skilled workforces that would be needed in these industries.
Great. And then I had a question about the first map that you showed, I believe, of the wind farm. It looked like on the ocean side, excuse me, on the ocean side, there was an area of outline that called itself a demonstration site, and also south of the jetty, a disposal site. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about both of those things. Sure.
I believe you're referring to this. And so I had mentioned that what happens is basically, this doesn't really have anything to do with the wind. This is dredging. And so with the Army Corps of Engineers, they take 1 million cubic yards and they take it 3 miles offshore to what's called HOODS, or the Humboldt Open Ocean Disposal Site. This is basically a landfill. And they've taken over 20 million cubic yards of sand from the entrance and deposit it right here in this area. And so, as I mentioned, the North Jetty is kind of starved for sand. And so what the Coastal Commission and a number of different agencies have said is that if they would take and slowly deposit the sand, in other words, drive the vessel along the ocean, and this is just sand, and then slowly deposit it, then that sand would naturally wash itself up on the North Jetty and then replenish the beaches and dunes on the North Jetty area. And so that's what this near-term demonstration site is all about, is to really do a beach replenishment program for the dunes along the shore of the North Jetty.
Got it. Thank you. I thought that it was going to be like samples of the wind turbines or something. I don't know what it was. So thank you for clarifying that. Are there any other questions? I don't see any more in the chat, just lots of thank yous. And thank yous for this great presentation.
And many, many thank yous. And if we have no other questions, I want to let you all know that next week on Monday, we have a presentation on brain health, tips to keep your brain healthy, presented by Megan Gallagher, Area 1 on Aging, Agency on Aging. She's given us 3 presentations thus far in the last 24 or 12 months, and she always does a great job. So we look forward to seeing you again. And Larry, thank you so very much, and thank everyone for coming. And don't hesitate to ask for support when you need support in getting the word out about this.
Okay, I want my daughter to come back from college and have a good job.
Right.
It's part of the motivation that I've heard for many, many, many years. And now it's my turn that I want my daughter to come back to raise her family here.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for being here. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Larry. We really appreciate it. Thanks, Alex, for your help as well. We hope to see you next week.
You take care.